Janitor hears crying in empty school. What he finds changes everything. Asterisk, the hallways of Lincoln Elementary School were eerily quiet at 9:30 p.m. as 60-year-old Henry Washington pushed his cleaning cart through the dimly lit corridors. After 15 years of working the night shift as head janitor, Henry knew every creak, every shadow, and every sound that belonged in the old brick building. The rhythmic squeak of his cartwheels and the distant hum of the heating system were the only sounds that should have been echoing through the empty classrooms and hallways. Henry took pride in his work, treating the school as if it were his own home. He knew every teacher by name, remembered which students had allergies that required special cleaning products, and often stayed late to make sure everything was perfect for the next school day. The children called him Mr. Henry, and he had watched many of them grow from kindergarten through 5th grade, celebrating their achievements and offering quiet encouragement when they struggled. Tonight felt different, though. There was a tension in the air that Henry couldn't quite identify, a feeling that something was out of place in his carefully ordered world. He had already cleaned the main office, the library, and most of the first-floor classrooms, working his way methodically through his nightly routine. The building should have been completely empty except for him. All the teachers had left hours ago, and the after-school programs had ended by 6 p.m. That's when he heard it. A soft, muffled sound drifted down the hallway from somewhere near the 3rd grade wing. Henry stopped pushing his cart and listened intently, his weathered hands gripping the handle as he strained to identify the noise. For a moment there was only silence, and he wondered if he had imagined it. Then he heard it again, unmistakably the sound of a child crying. Henry's heart began to race. No child should be in the building at this hour. The school had strict policies about students remaining after hours, and every teacher was required to do a final sweep of their classroom before leaving. How could a child have been overlooked for over 3 hours? Moving as quietly as possible, Henry abandoned his cart and followed the sound down the hallway. The crying was coming from Mrs. Rodriguez's 3rd grade classroom, a room he had cleaned just an hour earlier. He was certain it had been empty then, but now he could clearly hear the heartbreaking sobs of what sounded like a very young child. Henry approached the classroom door, which was slightly ajar, and peered inside. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Huddled in the corner behind Mrs. Rodriguez's desk was a small boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with tears streaming down his face and his small body shaking with fear and exhaustion. The child was Marcus Thompson, a quiet 3rd grader who had always seemed different from his classmates. While other children were picked up by parents or caregivers, Marcus often walked home alone, and Henry had noticed that the boy's clothes were sometimes dirty or ill-fitting. But seeing him here, alone and terrified in the dark classroom, Henry realized that Marcus's situation was far worse than anyone had imagined. Henry gently pushed open the classroom door and stepped inside, his heart breaking at the sight of the frightened child. Marcus looked up with wide, tear-filled eyes, clearly expecting to be in trouble for being in the school after hours. Instead of the anger or authority figure he feared, he saw the kind face of Mr. Henry, the janitor who had always smiled at him in the hallways. "Hey there, Marcus," Henry said softly, crouching down to the boy's level. "What are you doing here so late, son? Are you hurt?" Marcus wiped his nose with his sleeve and shook his head, but his tears continued to flow. "I'm sorry, Mr. Henry," he whispered. "I know I'm not supposed to be here. I just ... I didn't know where else to go." Henry's experienced eyes took in the details that told a story no child should have to live. Marcus's clothes were the same ones he had worn to school that morning, now wrinkled and dirty. His backpack was stuffed full, bulging with what looked like all of his possessions. Most telling of all, the boy had the hollow, exhausted look of someone who had been carrying a burden far too heavy for his small shoulders. "You're not in trouble, Marcus," Henry assured him, settling down on the floor beside the boy. "But I need to understand what's happening. Why aren't you at home with your family?" The question opened a floodgate of pain that Marcus had been holding back for weeks. Through broken sobs, he told Henry a story that would haunt the janitor for the rest of his life. Marcus's mother had been struggling with addiction for months, disappearing for days at a time and leaving her son to fend for himself. 3 days ago, she had left and simply never come back. "I waited and waited," Marcus said, his voice barely audible. "I ate all the food in the house, but then it was gone. The electricity got turned off yesterday, and it was so dark and scary. I didn't know what to do, so I came to school early this morning and just stayed." Henry felt tears welling up in his own eyes as he listened to the boy's story. Marcus had been hiding in the school for an entire day, slipping into empty classrooms. During recess and lunch, avoiding detection by staying quiet and out of sight. He had been surviving on the free breakfast and lunch provided by the school, too afraid and ashamed to tell anyone about his situation. "I'm sorry I hid in your school," Marcus continued. "I know it's wrong, but I was so scared. I didn't want to go to one of those places where they put kids when their moms can't take care of them. I just wanted to stay somewhere safe until my mom comes back." Henry's heart shattered at the innocence in Marcus's voice, the way he still believed his mother would return, still hoped that his nightmare would end with a happy reunion. But Henry had seen enough of the world to know that some stories didn't have fairy tale endings, and this little boy needed help that went far beyond what his mother might be able to provide. "Marcus," Henry said gently, "you are the bravest little boy I've ever met, but you can't stay here alone. You need adults who can take proper care of you, make sure you have food and a warm place to sleep every night." "But what if my mom comes back and can't find me?" Marcus asked, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. Henry pulled the boy into a gentle hug, feeling the fragile bones beneath his thin shirt. "If your mom comes back, we'll make sure she knows where you are and that you're safe. But right now, the most important thing is taking care of you." Henry knew he had to call the authorities, but he also understood that Marcus was terrified of being taken away by strangers. The boy had already endured so much trauma, and Henry wanted to make the transition as gentle as possible. He decided to start by calling the school principal, Mrs. Sarah Mitchell, who had always shown special concern for the school's most vulnerable students. "Mrs. Mitchell," Henry said when she answered her phone, "I'm sorry to call so late, but I have a situation at the school that needs immediate attention. I found Marcus Thompson hiding in one of the classrooms. He's been here all day, and it appears he's been abandoned by his mother." Mrs. Mitchell was at the school within 20 minutes, bringing with her a social worker named Janet Collins, who specialized in emergency child welfare cases. While they waited, Henry sat with Marcus, sharing stories about his own childhood and gradually helping the boy understand that accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness or betrayal of his mother. "When I was about your age," Henry told Marcus, "my family went through some hard times too. Sometimes adults have problems that make it difficult for them to take care of children, even when they love those children very much. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong." When Mrs. Mitchell and Janet arrived, they were struck by the scene before them. Henry, a man who had dedicated his life to caring for the school and its students, was sitting on the classroom floor with a frightened child, creating a bubble of safety and comfort in what could have been a traumatic situation. Janet Collins had been working in child welfare for over a decade, and she had rarely seen such a clear case of a child in crisis being handled with such compassion and wisdom. "Marcus," she said, introducing herself gently, "Mr. Henry called us because he's worried about you, and so are we. We want to make sure you have a safe place to stay tonight and that you get the help you need." The process of removing Marcus from the school was handled with extraordinary care. Janet explained each step to the boy, ensuring he understood that he wasn't being punished, and that the adults around him were working together to keep him safe. Mrs. Mitchell arranged for Marcus to take some of his favorite books from the classroom library, while Henry promised to check on him and make sure he knew he would always have a friend at Lincoln Elementary. As they prepared to leave, Marcus clung to Henry's hand. "Will I still be able to come to school here?" he asked, his voice small and worried. "That depends on where you end up living," Janet explained. "But no matter what happens, your education will continue. And Mr. Henry will always be here if you need to talk to someone who cares about you." Henry knelt down and looked Marcus in the eyes. "You listen to me, son. You are smart, you are brave, and you are worthy of love and care. Whatever happens next, don't you ever forget that. And if you ever need anything at all, you find a way to get word to me, okay?" Marcus nodded, finally managing a small smile through his tears. "Thank you, Mr. Henry. You saved me." But Henry knew the truth was more complicated than that. Marcus had saved himself by having the courage to seek safety, and now it was up to the adults in his life to make sure that courage was rewarded with the care and stability every child deserved. The investigation into Marcus's situation revealed a heartbreaking pattern of neglect that had been building for months. His mother, Lisa Thompson, was found 3 days later in a rehabilitation facility 2 states away, having suffered a severe overdose. She was alive, but facing a long road to recovery, and it became clear that she would not be able to care for Marcus for the foreseeable future. Janet Collins worked tirelessly to find the best possible placement for Marcus. His father was not in the picture, and there were no immediate family members able to take him in. The usual process would have been to place him in the foster care system, but something about this case felt different to everyone involved. Henry found himself unable to stop thinking about Marcus. The janitor had never married, had no children of his own, and had always channeled his nurturing instincts into caring for the school and its students. But Marcus's situation had awakened something deeper in him, a fierce protective instinct that surprised him with its intensity. "I can't stop thinking about that boy," Henry confided to Mrs. Mitchell a few days after the incident. "I keep wondering if he's scared, if he's eating enough, if he knows that someone cares about what happens to him." Mrs. Mitchell had been thinking the same thing. She had watched Henry's interaction with Marcus and had seen something beautiful, a natural bond between a man who had spent his life caring for others and a child who desperately needed that care. "Henry," she said carefully, "have you ever thought about becoming a foster parent?" The question hung in the air between them, both revolutionary and perfectly logical at the same time. Henry was 60 years old, single, and had never considered parenthood. But he was also stable, employed, and had demonstrated a natural ability to connect with children in crisis. "I don't know anything about being a parent," Henry said slowly. "I'm just a janitor." "You're not just anything," Mrs. Mitchell replied firmly. "You're a man who saw a child in need and responded with compassion and wisdom. You created safety for Marcus when he had nowhere else to turn. That's not just being a janitor. That's being exactly the kind of person a child like Marcus needs." The idea began to take root in Henry's mind. He spent the weekend researching foster care requirements, talking to social workers, and honestly examining his own motivations and capabilities. He was older than most foster parents, and he would be doing it alone, but he had advantages too. Job security, a stable home, and a deep understanding of children's needs. Most importantly, he couldn't shake the memory of Marcus's small hand in his, the trust in the boy's eyes, and the promise he had made to always be there if Marcus needed him. On Monday morning, Henry called Janet Collins. "I want to apply to be Marcus's foster parent," he said simply. "I know it's unusual, and I know there are probably younger, more traditional families available. But that boy and I have a connection, and I think I can give him what he needs." Janet was quiet for a moment, then said, "Henry, in 15 years of social work, I've learned that love and stability matter more than age or family structure. Let's talk about what this would involve." The process of becoming a foster parent was more complex than Henry had anticipated, involving background checks, home inspections, training sessions, and psychological evaluations. But with each step, his determination only grew stronger. He transformed his spare bedroom into a child's room, painting the walls a cheerful blue and filling it with books, toys, and educational materials. Meanwhile, Marcus was staying with a temporary foster family who, while kind, were strangers to him. Janet arranged for Henry to visit Marcus regularly, maintaining the connection that had formed between them during that frightening night at the school. These visits became the highlight of Marcus's week, and Henry could see the boy beginning to hope that maybe, just maybe, he might have found a permanent home. "Mr. Henry," Marcus said during one of their visits to the park, "Mrs. Collins says you might be able to take care of me. Is that true?" Henry chose his words carefully, not wanting to make promises he couldn't keep. "I'm working very hard to make that happen, Marcus. I want you to know that no matter what, you'll always have someone who cares about you, but I hope very much that we can be a family." The word family hung between them, full of possibility and hope. Marcus had never really had a stable family, and Henry had never imagined himself as a father figure. But sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that form out of necessity, love, and mutual need. After 6 weeks of paperwork, interviews, and evaluations, Henry received the call he had been waiting for. He was approved as Marcus's foster parent, with the possibility of adoption if the arrangement worked well for both of them. The day Marcus moved in with Henry was emotional for everyone involved. The boy arrived with the same stuffed backpack he had been carrying that night in the classroom, containing all his worldly possessions. But this time, instead of hiding in fear, he was walking into a home where he was wanted and welcomed. "This is your room," Henry said, opening the door to the cheerfully decorated bedroom. "Everything in here is yours, and you can arrange it however you like." Marcus stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the sight of a space that was entirely his own. There were new clothes in the closet, books on the shelves, and a desk where he could do his homework. But most importantly, there was a sense of permanence, of belonging, that he had never experienced before. That first night, as Henry tucked Marcus into his new bed, the boy looked up at him with serious eyes. "Mr. Henry, what if I'm not good at being in a family? What if I do something wrong?" Henry sat on the edge of the bed and smiled. "Marcus, families aren't about being perfect. They're about loving each other even when we make mistakes, helping each other learn and grow, and always being there for each other. You don't have to be good at being in a family. We'll figure it out together." As Henry turned off the light and headed toward the door, Marcus's voice stopped him. "Mr. Henry, thank you for saving me." "You saved yourself, son," Henry replied. "You were brave enough to ask for help when you needed it. I'm just grateful I was there to hear you." 6 months later, the transformation in both Marcus and Henry was remarkable. Marcus had blossomed from a frightened, withdrawn child into a confident, happy boy who excelled in school and had made several close friends. His teachers marveled at the change, noting how his academic performance had improved dramatically once he had the stability of a loving home. Henry, meanwhile, had discovered a capacity for love and nurturing that he never knew he possessed. The man who had spent 15 years caring for an empty school building was now caring for a child who filled his home with laughter, questions, and the beautiful chaos of childhood. He learned to help with homework, attend parent-teacher conferences, and navigate the complex world of elementary school social dynamics. The adoption process began when Marcus had been with Henry for 8 months. Lisa Thompson, Marcus's biological mother, had made progress in her recovery, but recognized that she was not yet stable enough to provide the consistent care her son needed. In a heartbreaking but loving decision, she agreed to terminate her parental rights so that Marcus could be adopted by Henry. "I want him to have the life I can't give him right now," she told Janet Collins through tears. "Henry loves him the way every child deserves to be loved." On a sunny Tuesday morning in May, Henry and Marcus stood before a judge as the adoption was finalized. Marcus, now 9 years old, officially became Marcus Washington, and Henry officially became a father. At the age of 61, how does it feel to be a dad? Mrs. Mitchell asked Henry at the celebration party the school threw for them. Henry looked across the room at Marcus, who was laughing with his classmates and showing off his adoption certificate. "It feels like everything in my life led to this moment," he said. "All those years of taking care of the school, watching over the children who passed through these halls, it was all preparation for taking care of this one special boy." The story of Henry and Marcus became legendary at Lincoln Elementary. Teachers used it as an example of how one person's compassion could change a life, and students learned about the importance of speaking up when they or someone they knew needed help. Marcus thrived in his new life, but he never forgot the lesson of that frightening night when he had nowhere else to turn. As he grew older, he became an advocate for other children in difficult situations, volunteering at homeless shelters and speaking to social work students about the importance of listening to children's voices. Henry continued working as the school's head janitor, but now he had a new perspective on his role. He wasn't just maintaining a building, he was creating a safe space where children like Marcus could find help when they needed it most. He made sure that every child knew they could talk to him if they were scared or in trouble, and his office became an unofficial safe haven for students who needed a moment of kindness in their day. Years later, when Marcus graduated from high school as valedictorian, he dedicated his speech to the man who had saved him. "My dad taught me that family isn't about blood or genetics," he told the assembled crowd. "It's about showing up for each other, especially in the darkest moments. He showed up for me when I had nowhere else to turn, and he's been showing up every day since." As Henry watched his son, for that's what Marcus truly was, deliver that speech, he reflected on how a single moment of compassion had changed both their lives forever. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the simple act of listening to someone who needs to be heard.